us for discussion. The first one being issues pertaining to liquidation process under IBC, and the second one pertains to the proposed amendments to Minerals Concession Rules 2016, specifically the new rule 23A, which is proposed to be introduced. We thank you once again, and as you know, we do have the privilege of having the IBB officials and also Mr. Ravi Prakash Kanti, sir, uh, who shall moderate the discussion today. So, without further ado, I will straight away request sir to kindly take over. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Subramaniam, would you like to make a few opening comments? Okay. Is the slide visible?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. The session today is on issues faced in liquidation process. Basically, the practical issues that various liquidators have been facing. The board had conducted a survey by way of talking to almost all the IPs who are carrying out liquidation. Some of the statistics they have circulated in the background note, which has been shared with all the participants. Out of 1,089 CRP cases as of end November 2020, which have gone into liquidation, the final reports have been submitted only in 155 cases, which is a very small success rate, considering the number of cases that have gone into liquidation. The BLRC report had stated that liquidation is the weak link in the insolvency and bankruptcy chain and needs to be strengthened. Out of these 1,089 cases, 85% cases are ongoing, 22% have crossed the 2-year mark, and 65% have already crossed the 1-year mark. The liquidators with whom the board had discussion have highlighted a number of major issues. What I will do is I will very, very quickly run through this just to recapitulate, and then we will start the discussion. So just about 5-7 minutes is what I will take, just to refresh memories of people who have not had time to read the note. Okay. The first issue, naturally, is about taking control of the assets of the city. Now, here the issues that come up have been lack of information and records of assets, resulting in incomplete and inaccurate liquidation estate being formed. Attachment orders issued by various statutory authorities which are in force, and the consequential delays in obtaining the release through judicial processes, because one has to go to each forum, which is different for each authority which has issued this stay order or the attachment order. The next is, of course, in the realization of assets itself, even after identifying, where it pertains to plant and machinery, it's been found that mostly it is old or obsolete, and very little interest is elicited from the buyer community. There is a significant lack of clarity on the private sale process. When can it be initiated? Who can do it? How it is to be gone about? There is the question of what to do with unsold assets which, after even many rounds of attempting to sell, do not get sold. And then there is the very significant issue of trade receivables and other actionable claims, where the parties from whom the monies are due, they either deny the existence of the dues, or they claim that it is time barred. And then there is a significant absence of supporting documents. Either the documents just don't exist, or they are not retrievable, or they have been lost, or because of non-cooperation, etc., one is not able to lay hands on that. Excessive litigation, another major issue. This includes frivolous litigation by promoters in various forums, trying to take back their assets through devious means, even though they are not eligible. litigations by the unsuccessful resolution applicants themselves. In case the resolution plan has not been accepted by the COC and the company has gone to liquidation, then there is litigation related to that. Uh, then there are litigations by promoters in the form of offering what would one call as unviable and unacceptable so-called OTS proposals, which have time and again been rejected by the lenders, but they still continue to keep going to different forum, making one offer after the other. Now, the next major issue, because liquidation is supposed to end everything, is the pending avoidance transactions. These relate to delay in adjudicating on avoidance transaction applications. Most applications till date filed in various benches across the country have not even been heard, let alone been disposed of, most of them. Then there is a lack of clarity on how to deal with the pending applications subsequent to the dissolution of the CD. And nobody yet knows what will happen to these, who will follow it up, who will bear the cost of it, and who will be the beneficiary of the proceeds, if at all they come. There is the perennial bugbear that starts with the CIRP and continues in liquidation, that is the non-cooperation from promoters or ex-directors, where records and information either they are not furnished or given in piecemeal, incomplete. There is delay in identification and physical transfer of assets, where the assets are located, the custody being given to the liquidator. All these things get, the problems are there in every one of these issues. And even when the liquidator and prior to that, the RP has filed applications under Section 19(2) and even obtained orders from the adjudicating authority, non-cooperation in some form or the other continues to be shown by the management and promoters. There is the next issue, which is the delay in clearances from government departments, where such clearances are required to be obtained. There is, of course, the lack of clarity of provisions of the code among members of the government departments, which would include the income tax department, the GST. SEBs, of course, they are under the government, though they are not government per se, that is the state electricity boards or the DISCOMs or whatever. But because they are mostly owned by the government, the processes that they follow are very similar to what the government does. So there are issues relating to that. Then there are delays in processing of refunds, whether it's a GST refund or IT refund. And till such refund is processed, the dissolution cannot take place, even if all the assets have been sold and the money is distributed. There are a few other issues also which have been highlighted, which is the delay in triggering of Section 52 or relinquishment of a security interest, the delay by the secured creditors in realizing the assets which they have taken away under Section 52. There is also the case of liquidators waiting endlessly for sale of assets by secured creditors, even when no monies are to be received from them. I mean, these are situations where the asset value is such that it will cover only a fraction of the claim of the said secured creditor. Even then, sometimes it's been found that liquidators tend to wait before filing the dissolution application. Where debtors are concerned, that is receivables, then debtors are scattered throughout the country in many cases. And there is the difficulty of initiating CIRP against each of them. There is this question that arises, which we will discuss, that liquidation is basically a recovery process. And in such a case, is CIRP, which is supposed to be resolution, the right method? There is the issue of receivables from foreign debtors, how to get them, how to even contact them, let alone recover from them. Then there are difficulties in providing details of claimants in Form 1 when depositing undistributed proceeds with the board. I think 6 is probably a very rarest of rare cases. So most people will not face this issue. But in the case where they do, this does become an issue. Based on feedback from time to time, the board has made significant interventions uh, within the powers that are available with them. Regulations have been amended to provide for deemed relinquishment of security interest after 30 days from the liquidation commencement date. The board has circulated a facilitation letter enumerating important case laws in the aid of liquidators. Another similar letter which articulates the claims, rights, role of government and its agencies, and also the good governance practices which liquidators can uh, carry out. The amendment in regulations which permits sale of or disposal of a not readily realizable asset. That is a recent amendment which has come in, which allows the liquidator to dispose of such assets which are not otherwise readily saleable. The board is also working on operationalizing a platform for distressed assets shortly. Okay. So these are the ones, all the issues related to liquidation. The minerals and mines issue we will come to later. Now the floor is open for discussion. I will stop sharing this so that we can see each other. Let me see. Yes, the floor is open, and members, please make your observations, comments. Any issue not covered here, welcome to please add to that. Members of the board and the IP are here to listen to your suggestions and observations. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, please.
See, recently we had a, one-to-one review. Liquidation team members have contacted all the liquidators, and we have taken feedback. And with the, after summarization of all the issues, we have released this paper, background paper. See, what we have come to know is almost 85 to 90% of the issues are, unavoidable, which is beyond our control because of various litigations with NCLT or NCLAT, or there is a defective title in the immobile properties, or non-cooperation from the promoters, or non-relinquishment of securities by the bankers. Of course, these are all, I think, known to everyone. See, but there are a few issues we observed. Of course, 90% of the IPs are doing very well in spite of all odds. They are, with their professional experience, they are coming out successfully by completing the process, or coming out of various litigations. But we have observed that 1 out of 10, there is some lack of initiative, particularly in liquidation, handling liquidation cases. There is let it go on its own type of attitude. They are not taking initiative to move forward. In the sense, we observed that there was a gap between one e-auction and another e-auction. There was a gap of 5 to 6 months. And see, while pursuing with the bankers for relinquishment of security also, in few cases, I am talking about very few cases, 90% of the cases, they are doing very well. Is very few liquidators, see, just for getting, this non-relinquishment, relinquishment of their security from that letter from the bankers, they are taking more than 1 year. A little bit more persuasion is needed, a little bit more initiative is needed. And when there is any application filed by the, unsuccessful resolution applicant with NCLAT, there also it is taking 18 months. Of course, see, there are delays from NCLT side, we all of us know very well. But at the same time, some follow up with the advocate, See, normally what we hear is such type of applications in 1 or 2 hearings. I mean, even in the first hearing itself, that will be stricken off by the NCLT. But I think follow up with advocates is not happening, and many times, even after 10 times of e-auction also, the asset is not sold. Of course, plant and machinery we can understand, but land and buildings, normally when there is no, I mean, defective title, the title is very clear. After 10 auctions also, if they say that it is not sellable without any defect in the title, I think, you see, anyway, that valuation can be, I mean, during the commencement of liquidation itself, liquidators have been given option to go for another set of valuation when they think that there was a drastic reduction or the market is not conducive for sale. Either, I mean, they are not going for the second valuation. At the same time, they are conducting auction by auction. And after 10 times also, they are not successful. Sometimes what we feel, I mean, there is a little bit of push or little bit of marketing is also required for sale of such assets, and a little bit of initiative to pursue the bankers, to pursue with the advocates. I mean, just we felt after having a one-to-one discussion, of course, this is very minority. The number of cases, I mean, we have come across such type of issues are very minor in the sense around 10 to 12% only. In 80 to 90% of the cases, our IPs are doing very well in spite of various hard situations. Even though there are no funds in the CD, they are, I mean, even they are, I mean, putting up their money from their own sources, and they are, I mean, completing the process quickly. But in few cases, at least in 10% of the cases, we observed such type of situations. Of course, because this is the right platform, I am bringing it to your notice. Of course, majority, 90% of the cases are unavoidable or beyond our control, wherein, I mean, policy intervention or some best practices we have to adopt. Just this is one word I want to inform you at this juncture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Subramaniam. Thanks a lot. You have clarified a few points. Yes. Anybody would like to make a mention of anything?
Yeah, Dipti here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you have covered very well all issues and problems and all that. And just now rightly mentioned also that, you know, that as regards problem in e-auction. Just I want to ask that, that means that suppose after few rounds of e-auction, you are unable to sell, then can you opt for second valuation and then try again e-auction? That can be the kind of lookout as such. And
Yes, you can go for second valuation if the, I mean, the valuation report was an old one beyond 1 year. Definitely, you can ask for a revaluation instead of spending money and time, wasting time and money for auction after another auction. I think it is better to conduct a fresh valuation. Of course, I heard some of the bankers, they are objecting, but we have to explain to them the valuation was very old, and there is a, I mean, as per IBBA guidelines, only 10% can be reduced in old cases. Of course, in the new cases, I think 25% in the subsequent auction, after that 10% only. So particularly plant and machinery, there is an every need, because if the plant and machinery, I mean, it is not used for even for 2 years also, it goes to rust and dust, and the value, I mean, normally, I mean, reduces considerably, comes down drastically. And moreover, because of, I mean, quick technological changes, I mean, 5 years old machinery may not be now, I mean, marketable in the present scenario because of the advanced technology that is coming into market. Every 4 or 5 years, new technologies and new type of machines, more sophisticated machines are coming into the market. Because of that, particularly plant and machinery, there is every need. If during, I mean, the valuation was an old one, particularly more than 1 year, more than 18 months, land and building, there may not be much difference, but plant and machinery, definitely it requires a second valuation. And suppose if RP is the same, I mean, liquidator and RP were the same, one and the same, if the RP is continued as, you know very well the market situation, the value of the, I mean, security, or the condition of the plant and machinery, or the other assets, whatever available in the city, you have to take a call and immediately you have to convince even bankers also. Normally bankers will be reluctant to spend more and more. That is a different issue, but you have to explain that, see, if we go with the same valuation, after 5 auctions also, we may not be successful. We, particularly for planted machinery, there is every need to have a fresh valuation. Accordingly, if you fix the price, the process can be concluded. When the assets are realized at the earliest, that is beneficial for all the stakeholders also. And anyway, regulations allow you for go for a second valuation at the commencement of liquidation also, or even after 1 or 2 auctions, if you feel that there is a need to revalue these assets, just you can go for it. No, there is no issue.
Okay. Because another thing is to be observed that you don't know the plant and machinery valuation when the valuer does it, and maybe after 1 or 2 e-auction failure, the people who comes for inspection, they give their view that you have valued very high, this cannot be worked out so high. So many times even valuation is done, but you can't prime facie say that no, this value cannot be achieved, because you are taking it from registered valuer. But then later on it realizes the people come for inspection and they give their view that this value is very high, you will not get because they are a buyer. So that time you feel that, I think it is better to do valuation, because private sell, otherwise application is required to NCLT, which itself take time.
Hello, Devang Sampath here. Firstly, I thank Ravi Prakashji for very practical and great inputs as always. Few points which I would like to add is, maybe the listing of liquidation is also to be done on some platform, including by IBBI, just like CIRP. Now, for going concern sales, etc., which you are supposed to do in first 90 days, there needs to be a clear law that government department, whatever dues are there, there would be, even if they don't file a claim, they cannot, maybe for a buyer, they cannot push the claim later on. Because when we are trying as a going concern, government departments don't file their claim and they want the new buyer to come in and then maybe push in the issues. Sometimes it is also done backhand by promoters to disrupt the liquidation. Another important input which I would like to say is similarly for cartels, etc., some practical advice has to be worked out, because we know that cartels are operating, but we cannot do anything on it because we don't have evidences. At most we can reject, but even that will be supposed to litigation. Now, when you are going for liquidation, there should be also clarity on law whether we are able to give commissions to people or not. There are properties, you can have real estate agents, etc., for that. But are we allowed to give commission? What is the level? That is important, because if it is liquidation value and then you are giving commissions, whether that can be reduced from liquidation value, whether that comes cost of liquidation, etc. That is another important aspect, because without an intermediary, it will be very difficult to, usually in most circumstances, to get asset which is usually illiquid to be sold. And another aspect is, of course, there is regulation 4 on fees, but there has to be some maybe compulsory guideline also on fees, just like in CRP, even for liquidation. Otherwise, there are issues which are faced when the properties are illiquid, or even if they are very liquid, banks would like to go for SARFAESI and give nothing for the liquidator. And in that case, what usually happens is the existing resolution professional doesn't come in. A new liquidator comes in because he knows he won't get any fees. And when the new liquidator comes in and he is not aware of it, and then the issues are unnecessarily delayed. So with some clarity on fixed amount of fees, etc., that would be helping. The process would be faster and smoother. Maybe these are some inputs from my side. And Ravi Prakashji, as always, can always add to these.
Thank you, Devang. Thanks a lot.
I want to give a small clarification on some of the issues raised by our professional. One thing is, when you feel that there is, government or any other government department may create an issue once the CD has been sold as a going concern, you can request the NCLT to incorporate in the order itself that the CD has been transferred to so-and-so person in the process of this IBC, and it has been sold as a going concern, and you can in the NCLT order itself ensure that it is incorporated that there cannot be any claim from so and so departments, because the CD has in the form of a new avatar, in the form of so and so, in the hands of so and so, and the old dues cannot be claimed by any authority, any creditor, even including government authorities. That type of one clause may be incorporated in the NCLT order, and we can request NCLT. These are the practical problems we are facing. Normally, they can do that, and so that that problem may not arise for the new person who has bought it in the process. That is one thing. The other thing is that e-auction platform for sale of distressed assets under liquidation, we are almost finalized. I think shortly it may be operationalized for sale of assets during liquidation also. These two are my submissions.
Yeah, one issue which came up was valuation. Just to put it across, Regulation 35 Subregulation 2, the wording is such that it almost mandates that the liquidator has to carry out a second valuation, and it has to be done within the first 7 days of liquidation. The way it is worded, this is a lacuna, and that is how I think most liquidators think. Now that the first 7 days are decision, can I do it now? Many people have question marks. This particular regulation, the wording will need to be slightly tweaked to, if the intent is to allow the liquidator to carry out the second valuation, then that should be brought into rephrasing the regulation.
Other issue, I think he has raised that issue of a commission, paying commission. What I feel his remuneration is on monthly basis. He can, with the approval of stakeholders, that whatever commission for sale of assets, such type of arrangement can be made. But I think if his remuneration is on regulations basis, I think it may be difficult because whatever fees he is getting out of that, he has to spend it. But if it is on monthly basis with the approval of stakeholders, if you convince them and interest it on commission basis for sale of those assets, I think it may not have a problem. Of course, more jurisprudence has to be developed on this issue.
My humble submission is that the scope of stakeholders consultation committee is just regulation 32, which is a mode of sale, nothing beyond that. All these aspects, this is not a COC, and they do not fall within the scope of stakeholders consultation committee, in my understanding.
That is okay. See, finally, the beneficiaries are stakeholders only. So that's why what I'm saying is, if your remuneration is on monthly basis, of course, what I'm saying is this is my personal opinion, because there is no clarity on this issue, particular issue. But if your remuneration is on monthly basis, and if you feel there is a lot of marketing efforts are required for sale of those assets, and you can just put the proposal before stakeholders, and if they agree for that, and I think may not be having a problem, and you can also submit in the progress reports with NCLT that this is the issue. On this basis, we have come to, minutes of the SEC have been enclosed. You can inform to NCLT also. There may not be a problem. But when you are drawing your fees, the remuneration based on the regulations, which is on the percentage of basis of the relation of the assets, I think a separate commission may not be paid, may not be acceptable. I feel this is my personal opinion. Of course, a lot of jurisprudence has to be developed in this particular issue.
One more suggestion, or I can say that way. The other issue is that getting consultant. You know what happens, that company don't have money, and you are unable to, and many times contribution, interim finance is an issue. Now you have to fight the litigations for recovery, and also many issues are there. So many times you require certain guidance, assistance. In that case, we don't have fund, and the people who know we use our credit, when later on it has a limit. Literally, I have certain threat that I will file the lawyer will file a case because I have not paid, so they know me. So in that situation, it's become difficult to get good consultant, lawyers, and all that. So, and also set aside the fees of insolvency professional, but even consultant, even valuer, we are unable to pay many times. So I was earlier also just suggesting and telling that why can't they, and in that case, what happens if we are unable, we don't get a good consultant. So the situation is that in that scenario, to avoid this kind of situation, if this can be also considered as an interim finance, because ultimately if this money has to be paid, it would have been contributed by FC, and that they have not contributed. That's why we are facing this situation. And so indirectly it's all interim finance, it's a insolvency and liquidation cost. So if we permit the interest to them also, then the process will be quite smooth. As on today, it's very difficult to get all consultant and all services on credit, and credit also for how many, a year, and also it's a difficult. Literally people ask that, okay, the company is in insolvency, we need advance. This scenario is there. So actually somewhere I read that, IBBI is trying to use that solution by its own fund or something, but it will be never ending story. So many companies are there. There should be a viable solution that is survive, because see, if that money would have been contributed by FC, they would have fetched the interest, and this situation would have not been there, but they have not contributed. That's why everyone is not paid. So indirectly they are funding the process. So why they are not entitled to interest? The intention is not to give them benefit, but the intention is to get a good consultant and the process smoothly carries out. That is our suggestion.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm
Raghu
Raghu here.
Babu, yes.
Yeah. Great, listen to all of you. And, I think, Deepti is bang on, not able to pay to these consultants. I mean, this is one major, hurdle for the RPs, either during the CARP or the liquidation. I mean, obviously, a lot of litigation in the NCLT, NCLAT, and we are not able to pay fees, to lawyers, valuers, I mean, forget about 1-2 months. It is taking 6 months, 12 months. Now with the merger of the banks, this compounded many times. In matter of 1 year, this account moved to 4-5 places. I mean, it is becoming very embarrassing. Even if we say, it is interim finance, for interest, I don't think, all the service providers are interested in interest. That won't really solve. I think this needs to be, solved, very, very effectively. Maybe a proper direction from IBBA to all the banks, and, ensuring that there is a time bound, payment of, once the submitted in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there has to be a time bound, payment of, these dues. This is what I wanted to mention. Yeah, thank you.
And sir, until COC or stakeholders committee is regulated, even by IBBA circular or something, they are least bothered, to be very honest, because they are unregulated entities. So that does not affect in their day-to-day working.
I think, yeah, somewhere, get for this, COC and the stakeholder only can improve, things better. There are a lot of things which we don't have control. We are getting punished. Our performance is, questioned, but, but where we don't have, I think this is very, very important. A faster pace, or, a better, efficient way. Yeah.
Just to address this issue, I mean, I want to convey all of you that recently we had, series of meetings with IBA and also various bankers, and we have raised some of these issues also. And we have also proposed that a code of conduct for committee of creditors or bankers also may be brought into. That proposal is also there. I don't know, when it will form the shape and when it will be coming into force. But a lot of meetings have been conducted with all the bankers and IBA, Indian Banks Association. Almost, I think, 6-7 meetings are conducted, and I mean, in depth, all the issues we have discussed all these type of issues. Just for information, I am sharing this. We had a series of meetings with IBA and all bankers.
That will be really useful. Thank you.
And there was a proposal
Great
that
effort.
a code of conduct for bankers or committee of creditors also may be brought into. That was the proposal. Let us see when it actually form a shape and come into existence.
Yeah, again, I'm reiterating, but the problem is, even the resolution plans are implemented, entire money is paid, security documents are not being released because they don't have accountability. This is one big, but as you already we started discussing with IPA, code of conduct, some kind of a punishment mechanism, incentive or disincentive. This particular stakeholder needs to be, we should bring the accountability. I think lot of problem will go away.
It is noted, and we'll just convey when when these issues come before us with bankers, when code of conduct is in a formation stage.
Here, if I may intervene, in issues related to SEBI, I think we would have had a sort of a memorandum of understanding executed between IBBI and SEBI, which helped a lot because after that SEBI came out with many of its own regulations, which eased up the process. If something similar can be done with the RBI, because RBI is the regulator, and banks
Correct.
listen only to RBI, nobody else. Rightly so, because and that's the state of standard, how it should be. So while you have discussions with the bankers and the IBA, I think in the end it will have to be IBBI with RBI, which will have a solution.
There's an MOU between IBBI and RBI, I believe. Rohit Prakash.
There is one with SEBI, but I don't know with RBI how much it has happened.
It was first with RBI and later it was done with SEBI.
So, like in the government of India, when there are issues which cross different departments, each one issues a notification which is in sync with the other. So something similar will need to happen if we expect the bankers to adhere to whatever requirements, then such a notification will have to come from the RBI.
Further, one more suggestion. Can I?
Yeah, please.
Even a labor commissioner is required a little awareness because the workers and employees agitation and all that is an issue. So if that can pass on to the workers because they are affected adversely, that will help the actually. Honestly, yesterday only I faced it and it was reached up to police. It should have been, but somehow I saved and I can't get escorted by security and I'm out. Otherwise, I was in a Ghera position only yesterday. So, it has to be passed on to the ground level through labor commissioner and union leaders. That helps actually.
Dipti ji, I have experience that they accept backdated complaints and hand in glove with promoters and intentionally create issues. I have evidences on record, even police not accepting complaint, later on even police harassing. So all these issues are there, which maybe over a period of time have to be worked on. They are fully aware and they are hand in glove with promoters, which I have seen.
Not necessarily every cases. Many times the workers are also is hard hitten, so they have their anger.
Agreed,
because
agreed.
they lost their job and that's bread and butter. So because they are being told that we are the representative of the corporate and we are the only people who knows, and they are not knowing that. So their negativity comes out on us only. That is going to be there. But it affects also, so it has to be, and it's very difficult to educate them at that level. So if union leader through, labor ministry and all that helps. Actually, I am doing that also myself individual, but I think I suggested earlier also that Ministry of Labor, and that has to be passed on. This awareness, this is required.
Thank you. Anybody else has anything else to say? Any other issue you would like to bring to the notice? I think basically because the board had conducted intense discussions with almost all the liquidators, so a lot of issues were already captured in the background paper.
You have covered almost everything.
Yeah, that is the board. I just
It's like a very detailed document. It should be saved, huh?
Yes, yes. The board did a very, very great job on the background note, and I think that's there with all of us. So, if nothing else is there on the liquidation side, which I think Devan raised about sale as a going concern is probably a much bigger, broader, and more what we call complex topic, which requires probably a session or many sessions, in fact, to understand what sale as a going concern is, what is its validity under IBC, how is it to be conducted, the linkage with companies act. If you so as a going concern, where is the provision to reverse the liquidation order? So many issues are there. There is a case also, I believe, going on right now in NCLAT on this matter.
On this sale of going concern, just I have a small point. See, actually, sale of going concern, it is also inserted or incorporated in the liquidation just to give another chance. If at all the CD can be revived, I mean that would be a better option, because it will be beneficial for all the stakeholders, including workmen or government, for everybody. And also there is a scope for maximum value of the assets. The main motto for incorporating sale as a going concern in the liquidation process also. However, actually what is happening, many people, promoters or any buyers, mostly buyers, just to take advantage of to avoid registration, stamp duty on the immovable property, they are buying it as a going concern, and liquidators are also trying for that. In fact, it is giving a damage to the concept itself, because in the Mohan Gems, see what I feel, this is only my personal opinion. In Mohan Gems, the main issue is NCLT has given that the sale of going concern itself is not a feasible concept. It was the opinion given by NCLT because of only one reason. In Mohan Gems, what happened? There is no other thing. There is no stock. There is no employee. Nothing there. No activity was there. Business already stopped, I think, long back. The only that available is, I think, a shop building. It was, it is a shop, I think, immovable property, which has been sold as a going concern. I think my personal opinion is just to save that stamp duty and registration fees for transferring in the name of buyer. Instead of that, to save that, he has bought it as a going concern. So because of misutilizing or misusing the provisions of any code, not only this liquidation process regulations or any other law, it is affecting other genuine cases also. Actually, the sale of going concern concept is designed for protection of the value of the assets, and also to give benefit to all the stakeholders. If the CD is revived, it would be beneficial for all the stakeholders in that organization. But what is happening, just to save some stamp duty, some fees, registration fees, stamp duty transfer duties. If any asset is sold as a going concern without anything, this is actually affecting the entire other CDs where there is a value, where the asset cannot be sold otherwise than as a going concern. Suppose if a power company is there, it has to be sold as a going concern, then only it will have some value. Otherwise, if you that power equipment is sold as a piecemeal basis, I think even half of the value also we cannot realize. So this is my humble request is, please try to avoid such type of things, because it is affecting the entire regulation, and it is becoming very difficult for the board to convince NCLAT or before judiciary to put our pleadings. It is becoming very, very difficult for us. That is my humble submission to all the professionals.
Thank you. If we don't have anything further on liquidation, should we move to the next topic, which is the proposed amendment to the minerals concession regulations?
Raviji, may I?
Right.
Yeah. During liquidation, I faced a typical problem. Like there were two financial creditors who were having the securities. During I was also IRP and RP during CRP process, and then there was an issue raised by one bank that the another bank is not holding pari passu charge because the pari passu letter were not exchanged among the banks. Otherwise, both were registered under ROC as a secured creditors, and there was no any question raised until final CRP, because whenever there was an issue raised, they said that they will sort it out among themselves, and they will not come to, they will, in case of difficulty only, they will approach RP. So RP presumed that the matter might have been resolved. And during liquidation, at the last stage of distribution of assets, the question was already raised by the first charge holder, that the pari passu charge which the another bank is holding is not valid because the letter of pari passu letter were not exchanged among themselves, and that is where he has challenged the entire distribution. They said that now they are unsecured creditors and we are secured creditors. So this type of situation, I have already recorded everything and I am going to an NCLT. But what is your opinion in that?
I think this comes under the issue of defective documentation, and that can happen because there are innumerable instances where documentation is not complete, has not been filed, has not registered. So I don't think regulations can take this can happen anywhere.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, these issues can be resolved only at the adjudicating authority level, sir. These are all disputes between secured creditors or claiming to be secured creditors. And there could be any number of such issues when it comes to the section 52 or section 53.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So shall we move to the next one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is a regulation rule which normally will not deal with most of us. Only some of us may be aware that such a thing exists. Related to minerals other than the competent hydrocarbon energy, which means other than nuclear related materials and oil and gas. This rules cover all the minerals. In a concession, mining concession, which is given by way of an auction, there is a provision in the rules to transfer the license to another party subject to the procedure under the rules. But the actual license comes at a much later stage. Initially, it is the matter of fact. The existing provisions did not have any such facility where the LOI could be transferred. So I think based on representations made to the government, they are proposing this amendment. These amended are there public domain for seeking suggestion. So they are proposing to add this rule 23A, whereby the LOI may be transferred, where the state government is satisfied that such transfer is necessary on conclusion of insolvency, liquidation, or bankruptcy proceedings. What is to be understood here is that this is not the jurisdiction of NCLT to make the transfer. Propose is that it is the government which gives such NOC or allows the transfer, the conclusion of the proceedings. So there may be some practical issues related to that. After the proceedings are concluded, there is a successful audit, and then it goes to the state government, and the state government might say no, and we are not going to give it to you for any valid reason. Here, the transfer is supposed to make an application before the state government, which has to decide in 90 days whether to approve or reasons. Now, there are conditions of that. As far as we as IPs are concerned, not so much important. For us, what will impact in our role as RP is first three. Okay, so this is what is proposed. These are 5 of them proposing. The transferee, that is the buyer or the successful RA, is liable to the state and central government on and the date of transfer for all the conditions of the original LOI. The state government to intimate the Bureau of Mines, that's procedural, and the state government to terminate any LOI or license upon breach conditions. Okay, those are standard conditions. So we come back to the first one, which is transfer can be effected only after the process is completed. What is meant by completion of process is not defined, which is an issue. By the plain reading of the rule as proposed, it would mean that the order of holding a successful resolution applicant or an asset sale and liquidation of bankruptcy. Yeah, now, please.
First of all, there needs to be a clarity whether these rules are applicable to major minerals or minor minerals, because one is a state subject, one is a central subject, and central government cannot notify anything on state subject. Second issue is whether it is related to captive mines or non-captive mines, because I believe for coal or iron and steel, captive mines were allowed in one of the cases. There was changes made. I'll have to recheck on that. But if it is a non-captive mine and a standalone mine, again, whether this is applicability, whether this is applicable or not. For captive, maybe for industrial purposes they allow. But if it's a private limited company or an individual who puts it into a private company and it's a standalone mine, again, whether this is applicable. Again, for minor mineral, major mineral, because there could be great amount of resolution if these things are allowed, and it will be a very big dampener if it is disallowed. So whether it is minor or major, whether it is captive or non-captive, the transfer should be allowed for great liquidation or resolution, in my understanding.
Okay, to clarify a few of your issues, okay. These cover both major and minor minerals because the rules talk of central and state government being involved and government giving the permission. These rules, this amendment in this 23A is proposed to be inserted, covers a gap in the existing rules. The existing rules allow transfer of the license once issued, the concession. This is the first step when the LOI is issued and the company decides to go into liquidation or whatever, or CRP, and it has not yet reached the stage where it is not a formal license in its favor. So it is proposed to plug that gap actually, that even the LOI is supposed to be made transferable. Okay, so what you are is where licenses exist and they are being transferred. That those provisions already. This is stage prior to that. many comments will come because most of us, we don't handle this.
Right, sir.
Yeah. So what I could see straight away, the first major issue is that how can you submit a plan which is contingent upon another agency giving its permission much later. The ICC has provided for advance permission from the CCI, Competition Commission. Probably this sort of things also is the ICC required to be tweaked where the RA comes with permission from the state government. Otherwise, there is no point putting on a plan which may or may not work. Yes. Anybody has anything to say?
No, sir, I think you are right because like CCI, that has to come earlier than resolution.
So maybe that there is one suggestion we can make that while the rules belong to different agencies and different department, parallel enabling provision can be made in the IBC where there should be a provision to get a advance approval from the state government. Right. Any other comment, clarification, question? Are here, so if you people want to ask anything you missed till now, please go ahead. If nothing is there, then we will wind up this session. Okay, I think that's to be it. Nitin, you.
Thank you very much, sir. We thank Subramaniam sir, the other IBB officials. We especially thank Ravi sir for taking out time, and we also thank all the participants for being there on a Saturday morning. I know it's a weekend and everybody likes to spend, this time with the family and all that, but they've taken out time. We thank you. Thank everyone for that. And with that, I think we can end the session.
Okay.
Thank you
all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.